you might have a winner. Hello, I'm Dr. John Middleton. This is Family Life in the North Country. To start with today, I had a man called and wanted to re-explain something that I talked about recently. Question was, what is the dependency ratio? Dependency ratio. It's a ratio of how many people work to support the people who aren't working, or one person actually. So, how many people are dependent? Take an ordinary family. How many people are dependent upon the wage earner in the family? So the dependency ratio varies, and it's very important. For example, Social Security, any kind of welfare program, retirement benefits, all of these things are all interrelated to the dependency ratio. And as our society gets older, because fewer people are being born, so the average age keeps going up, we have more and more people dependent upon one wage earner. How many people does it take to support the disabled, the people on Social Security, the young, the people who are too young to work? That's what the dependency ratio is. So I hope that answers the question, clarifies it a little bit better. Here's another one. She said, a recent study published in the Press Republican seemed to contradict what you said about working mothers and influence on children. Well, I went back and I read that. I don't think it really contradicts, because the study seemed like so many others, they're taking a short-term view. So many adjustment problems in children have been studied, for example, using academics, school dropout, something like that. That doesn't really capture the long-term attitudes. People may be able to pass their schoolwork, but to be quite unhappy. So the negative attitudes that seem to accrue with a working mother, that's a full-time working mother, and particularly the single-parent mother, they really have problems, particularly with boys. And that's in spite of how well the mother is adjusted, almost in spite of how much she tries. The super moms, you see them out here, it's just incredible what some of them really seem to do. How much effort they put into it, and good effort, very well intentioned. Okay, here's another one. It says a dental assistant told me that my teeth had outlived their life expectancy. I'm not sure what they teach in dental assistants or dental hygiene school, but teeth being made of enamel, I didn't really know they had a life expectancy, except in terms of what people eat and how much use the teeth get. Sure, that's related to age, but I'm talking about like eating foods that will grind down the teeth. But life expectancy, if somebody told me that my teeth had outlived my life expectancy, I think I'd raise an eyebrow and look a little askance. See, life expectancy has been going up since the turn of the century. And say I have a full set of teeth, and I've already lived to my life expectancy. What is a life expectancy? A life expectancy is a number of years a person is expected to live at the time of birth. Life expectancy is not to look at somebody, say my age, and say my life expectancy is thus and so. That's not what the phrase is about. Sure, we have an expectation for living at a particular time, but for example, life expectancy in the U.S. is roughly 76 years right now. Well, a person 76 years of age isn't expected to die that year. And that seemed to be what that question was about. Here's another one. Interesting. Somebody must be watching internet or who knows what. But anyway, it said the Boston Globe, I don't get the Boston Globe, had mentioned about a group meeting for touch acupuncture. So what is it? Well, I was trying to think touch acupuncture, and I finally put that together that yes, there is a technique which is based on acupuncture but doesn't use needles. I went over to Boston a couple of years ago and learned a technique like that, and it's very good for phobias and anxieties, things of that nature. And when it works very rapidly. So I'm guessing that that's what touch acupuncture refers to, because the people are taught to touch different parts of the body and get a particular result. That's not all there is to it. There's a little more to it than that. Here's an interesting question. Said, my son, 40 years old, was told he had schizophrenia and would probably be on welfare the rest of his life. The question is, what is the cause of that? It's very difficult. I remember reading a book, about 1950, that said the 50 causes, I think it was 50 causes of schizophrenia. The specific cause isn't really known. And schizophrenia apparently now is believed to be a condition that is due to a malfunction in how the brain works and the body chemistry. We hear a lot about dopamine, and we hear a lot about different chemistries, epinephrine and suppressors of different kinds in the brain. Well, all this is related to schizophrenia, and it seems that a person who develops this, at one time it was thought to be hopeless, and I guess that's what the person was told. That's certainly not the case today. It used to be, when I was a relative youngster in this business of working with people, I worked in mental hospitals. 40% of our patients, I remember the hospital where I went to work, we had any one day, we had about 5,500 patients on the grounds, and about 40% of them were schizophrenics. So it was a very common condition, and it's noted by a difficulty, a disorder in how a person thinks. It's usually a psychotic behavior in the sense that the person has trouble knowing what is reality in a certain area. It's a disturbance in the reality. A person may hear voices, or see visions, or have delusions. But here's what's been found about schizophrenia, and I think it's very encouraging. With medication, not only do those symptoms seem to be controllable most of the time, and most of the symptoms, but the person feels much more comfortable. Today, many people I know who have obtained a diagnosis of schizophrenia are working full-time, have families, going right along with their life, typically taking sustaining maintenance medications, and that's important. If people go to a physician, go to a psychiatrist, and get a good evaluation, get an evaluation in terms of what's going on, how they are going to adjust. Schizophrenia is not something that it once was thought to be. I certainly recall hearing psychiatrists tell families, well, you might as well go on home and forget the person. He's not going to get any better, or she's not going to get any better. And you know, they told them that sometimes, excuse me, in spite of the fact that there have always been spontaneous remissions. In other words, a certain percentage of people who are diagnosed as schizophrenic, having schizophrenia, have always had recovery, remissions, and almost 25%. sometimes 28% of the people would have spontaneous remission, and that was even without medication or in spite of treatment sometimes. So it's not the hopeless condition that we certainly once looked at and thought we could see it. The word schizophrenia, as everybody typically knows, means split mind. Phrenia is mind, and the schism is a split. But that's separate and apart from multiple personality. That's separate from what Jekyll and Hyde movie, the book, and so on was about. Schizophrenia is typically characterized by a difficulty, a disturbance in thinking, a disturbance in cognition, a disturbance in reality, and associated with symptoms such as delusions and hallucinations. Somebody might say, well, what's a delusion? A delusion is a false, unshakable belief. It has to be false. It has to be something that the person resists any and all evidence of changing opinion about. It is a false, unshakable belief. Somebody might say, well, what's an hallucination? Hallucination is a sensory perception without a demonstrable stimulus. It's a very brief, very short definition, but it's one that fits basically all conditions. People can put those definitions together and always know what it is. It's separate from an illusion. It's separate from misinterpretation of something that one sees. Okay, leave schizophrenia for the moment. Another one said a good friend of mine had a diagnosis of Tourette's syndrome. And said it was inherited. Is anything can be done about that? And do you agree that it's inherited? Yes, Tourette's syndrome seems to be basically in families, more often in males and families, and it is a condition which also responds pretty well to medications. It's more of an inconvenience than a disability for most people. In other words, they may have severe tics or spasms, which can be influenced by medication most of the time. And I know people who function very well in spite of having Tourette's syndrome. It's not something that's typically disabling. And the people I know with it are also well above average intellectually. I'm not sure if that's a characteristic, like gout, for example, is supposed to be an illness of the highly intelligent. It just so happens the people I know are highly intelligent. Okay, here's one. A little bit, say, more down to earth. Said my 10-year-old daughter is a bedwetter, and she's typically embarrassed by it. Do you have any suggestions? Yes. Girls are easier to help get over bedwetting than boys are. First, look at the schedule. When does the bedwetting occur? Look at the fluid intake. When is the last fluid that the child takes before going to bed? And look at the pattern. Sometimes it's as simple as not having anything to drink after 6 p.m., going to bed, and the last person and the last adult in the home who goes to bed, get the child up and take the child to the bathroom. Say at 10, 11 o'clock at night, the child may have been asleep a couple of hours, and get them, take them to the bathroom. It's usually pretty easy. Excuse me, if it doesn't work, something like that doesn't work, sure, there may be a medical problem, but this is not typically the case. There are simple ways. Sometimes children regress. They go backwards in their development, which is more of a psychological thing, not usually physical. a new child is born into the family, and maybe the child who hadn't been a bedwetter becomes a bedwetter. It appears sometimes that this is to get attention. Well, I know one family that seemed to have that worked out rather well. The child was old enough to make up her own bed. Happened to be a girl also. So when she wet the bed, she had to change it, take care of the laundry. But it's usually responsive to something simple. And here's one. Do people ever get too old to learn? Well, the older I get, the less I think that's true. Used to be expression everybody knows that can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I usually say, well, anybody who believes that really doesn't have an old dog, or they would know that old dogs are kind of like old people. Now, the dog may not be motivated to learn new tricks, and that's the big problem with old people. It's not that they can't learn, because as long as we're alive, we can be learning. And we are learning. Sometimes we're learning things we don't like, but most of the time it's a motivation to learn and an interest in learning. That's the biggest factor. I've given thousands of tests, psychological tests to people over a period of years. Used to be in that business. And older people taking tests, the biggest factor was to get them interested and motivated and over their fear of being tested. But once you got into that, they could certainly learn. There wasn't any question about whether or not a person can learn, it's just how much they could learn. Until another time, I'm Dr. John Middleton, Family Life in the North Country. Have a good one. Hello, I'm Dr. John Middleton. This is Family Life in the North Country. Start off today about, well, if I can remember what to start off with, the question is, do I think old people really lose their memory? The truth of that seems to be in the various studies in gerontology, and I taught gerontology, that's a study of social behavior of old people. Some do and some don't. We hear a great deal about Alzheimer's, that sort of thing, and dementia these days, and there isn't any question. People with Alzheimer's certainly are losing memory, but they're losing nerve fibers. It gets involved with coverings and insulation of nerves and the special coverings of nerves. There are a lot of conditions that change it. Here's what I find interesting, though. That I found, and I've done this for years, I found that young people use forgetting as a very frequent excuse. Anybody who's been a school teacher knows that the most common excuse is, oh, I forgot. Same thing, old person says that, people think, aha, it's a sign of age. You're getting too old to remember. But memory is sort of interesting. There's some studies on memory today that are so exciting compared to what was when I first started out. Memory is not just one thing, and it's not just in one part of the brain. So very logically, different parts of the brain have different circuits and circulation patterns, and a decrease in circulation or a problem in getting oxygen to certain parts of the brain may decrease memory, for example, or the recall, or something like the time of an event, or the color, or the sounds of an event. Memory is thought now to be made up of at least 5 different elements in different parts of the brain. And all of us are aware that sometimes we can think of one thing about something we're trying to recall, but we can't at the time think of something else. So I think it'll be very interesting in the next, probably in the next 5 or 10 years. We're going to be learning so very much more about memory that it's really going to be exciting. I haven't the faintest idea what memory really is. I speculate on it, I read about it. I know that it's biochemical. I know basically what other people read and study and know, but to come up to it, a specific thing, and say memory is something that's just sort of blank to me. Well, here's something, since I don't remember what I'm talking about, memory, get off into something perhaps a little more, easier to talk about. Either to have a strong opinion on it one way or the other. A lot of people do. The question was, do I think human beings have instincts? My answer very clearly is yes. I don't have a problem with people having instincts at all. When I first studied psychology, that was very popular was to discount. Human beings don't have instincts. Lower animals have instincts. But think about it. Think about how many cells in the body. I don't have any idea. Let's say several billion cells in the human body. When I first started studying it, we thought maybe there was 1 million. Well, now it's in the several billion. But here's what's interesting. Every one of those cells is on autopilot. Every one of them. What is instinct? We have individual cells on autopilot. In other words, an individual cells reacts a certain way according to a pattern. A cluster of these cells makes up tissue. A cluster of tissues makes up organs. A cluster of organs make up systems, and systems tend to make up the whole behavior of the human being. And all of it comes back to the little link in the chain down here that is the cell is on automatic pilot. I think also, though, that we have the ability to override our instincts in most things that are conscious behavior. Our behavior, which is under our control, we can override our feelings. We can override what maybe the body would tell us to do. But most of what goes on in a human being or any animal is an automatic behavior. Patterns act a certain way. Cells, tissue, and so on. And once you accept that idea, to me, then it just naturally leads to the answer, yes, human beings have instincts. We're not quite sure what they are. We seem to be finding, again, what was tossed out, say, in the 1915, 1920s studies. Studies were made, and then they were tossed out saying, oh, that's old-fashioned. People don't do that. But yeah, all mammals have instincts. All mammals, for example, are gregarious. That's a characteristic of mammal. We are mammals. We don't have any problem with that, do we? We need to be with people, and we like people. Okay, here's another one. Might fit somebody. That my wife says she's allergic to me. Is that possible? Well, I couldn't help, when the man asked me the question, I couldn't help but look at him and wonder if there was something about him that he was sensitive to. Answer, yes, it is possible, but not likely. Not likely in a gross way. It's sort of like an iceberg. We all know that an iceberg, tip of it above the water, is only about 1/5 of the iceberg. Most of it is below the surface. This is what goes on in behavior, too. What we are aware of in another person is like the tip of the iceberg. And so the two tips of the iceberg, above the surface, what people are reacting to as they are aware of, doesn't answer how much reaction is taking place between the bodies below the surface, are not in the person's awareness. We know that there are airborne hormones. Didn't used to know that. But airborne hormones. We know that people, and all of us, and all animals, exude, give off these elements that can be detected by other people, and not even in our awareness. It reminds me of what's called the McClintock effect. From a girl who was studying psychology in college, who became very interested in the fact that girls in girls' dorms, I told you how long ago it was, and no such thing as girls' dorms these days, is there? But the girls living together in close quarters in these dormitories tended to set up a regular pattern in their menstrual cycles. And it seemed to occur with such regularity that it was studied, and Barbara McClintock, although as a student at the time, is still living as a psychologist, is a research psychologist. We have now studied, and animal husbandry has studied this sort of thing quite a bit more than people have, how the presence of another animal influences behavior and influences the hormones. So there's much more to us than simply what we see. We have a mind, we have a body, we have a spirit, and we have chemical interactions. Sometimes very difficult to determine, very difficult to detect, but it doesn't mean they aren't there. These effects have been studied to some extent. I recall an article in Scientific American going into considerable detail about that, 20, 25 years ago. Well, here's a question that I sort of puzzled whether or not to mention it is a bear trap here. The question is there any rhyme or reason to what my father always says, that some churches are made up of dumb people and others of smart people? You can see the bear trap. People of different religions, and rather than looking at it that way, let's look at the dimensions of religion. Let's look at what's really involved. Excuse me. It's certainly true that a particular church group represents communities, and we certainly know that communities may represent different levels of society. Socioeconomically, educationally, there are different variables there, many variables. But all religious groups can be studied from perspective of dimensions. And take a look at that before trying to say, yes, Baptists do this, or Church of Christ people do that, or Catholics do this, or Presbyterians do this, in terms of whether or not one's smarter than the other one. Number one, most people follow the religion of their parents. That's the greatest influence in terms of people going to different churches. Without any other major influence being involved, most people simply follow what their parents' religion was. When few people, there are few of course, who choose churches and religions, what do they choose it on? What do they base it on? Well, this is where I think the dimensions are helpful. The understanding of the religion, the intellectual phase, the intellectual dimension, what is it that's understood? In a sense, that's taught to be understood. There's another element, and it's the ideological. What are the real concepts or precepts of religion? Yeah, most people, and I can't tell you that, about the particular church they go to. And some churches have more than others, some church religious groups. It's like asking somebody, why are you a Democrat or Republican? And most people can't really give a good answer. There's another dimension called the ritualistic. What do people in that religion do or don't do specifically and ritualistically? How do they handle different problems? There's the experiential, the feeling element in a religious group. How do people feel? What is the intended feeling for people? To feel comfort, to feel secure, to feel fellowship, to have different levels of activity in terms of experiencing what is the experience in the religion. And then the consequential. What happens to people who do or do not do whatever that particular church group professes to be. You know, the people who select churches and select a religious group also go on the basis of the rabbi, the priest, the minister, the clergy, the brother, the deacons, the elders of a group. They pick it on the basis of whether or not they like what that person says or how that person conducts himself, the charisma of the person. You put all these things together, and you can see it is very difficult to make a general statement about one church group representing the intellectual, another church group representing the lesser endowed, because there are so many different facets. I just read a book by a psychiatrist who, very interesting, Freud versus God is the title of the book. But what was also interesting to me is the psychiatrist, very well trained, head of a psychiatry department in a noted medical school, is also a member of an evangelical small religious group. It's unusual. Very good book, however. We look to see how churches are organized. Sometimes church groups appeal to people on the basis of how they're organized. For example, a congregational church. The people in the membership decide what the church stands for, what it believes in, who the preacher is going to be, who the minister is going to be. Maybe a committee is formed by the congregation and answers to the congregation. But the basic organization is at the basic level. Then there are the groups that are called the Presbyterian type, meaning elders. The congregation elects elders who manage the church. It's sort of like a Republican form of government. We elect people to go to Congress or to go into political office to manage the affairs. Then there's the Episcopal type church. That is, the bishop is the final authority. And that appeals to people. Each bishop is the final authority for the particular area. And then we have another one. It's the papal, excuse me, that most people are familiar with, has a pope. The papacy is the final authority. So once you get into trying to figure out why and how people choose different religions, there are a lot of different variables. And yes, you may find a particular intellectual level in one more than another one, or a relative absence of it. I think there's one group that stands out as pretty intellectual, and that's the group that almost has a creed not to have a creed, and basically it's a group of people who get together in the name of religion, but to study issues. They study issues for their own satisfaction, and they're typically issues of importance to them, religious issues. The Unitarians. And there are other churches that have a lot of ritual. There are other churches that have much more emphasis on the feeling level and the expression of emotions. So you get into all that sort of thing. It's kind of difficult to answer. Until another time, I'm Dr. John Middleton. This is Family Life in the North Country. Have a good one. Hello, I'm Dr. John Middleton. This is Family Life in the North Country. Here's a question that's sort of puzzling. It says, in family life, have you any reason to think that godparents are of any use today? Puzzling because yes. And it's interesting. I think the question certainly deserves consideration. A lot of people are godparents. A lot of people. Now, what are godparents? Those people who aren't really familiar with it, godparents are people who swear that they will step in to help the parents with religious instruction or to see that the children, their godchildren, receive the religious training and spiritual development that the parents are supposed to provide. And as we know, there's been a general trend that fewer people are involving themselves in religion, deeply in religion. So there would appear to be, yes, a greater need for godparents to step in. Both ways. And if you get into it, the promises that godparents make are the same as the parents. To see that a child receives religious training, spiritual development, if the parents cannot or will not, either way. And so, yes, I see a need, I see a greater need, perhaps than ever before. But I don't see that coming about. And not all churches, of course, have godparents. It's become largely something ceremonial, something that people do. Oh, and it's an honor at the time, and then people have parties for christening. It's a social event, but then sometimes they seem to just forget about it. Okay. Here's one a little bit more into my field of specialties. Do I accept dream analysis? Well, I used to much more than I do now. I was really gung-ho on it back in the 40s and early 50s. Now there's a problem in this sense. You can take a dream, take a person, and this has been done. I have books on it right here, that you submit this dream. I even have the person interviewed by different authorities, different dream analysts who are recognized as authorities in their field. And they come up with different interpretations. So dreams, we know, are pretty common. We also know that dreams can be influenced by medications people take, events that are happening during the day. And just because they're influenced by events that happen during the day, are the events that people want to have happen, it doesn't mean that analyzing them would necessarily be vitiated, or it wouldn't be accurate. But when you submit them to different authorities and they come up with different answers, I'm less and less inclined to go for dream analysis. I like consistency. I like dependability, reliability in something if I'm going to go for it. Here's one. It says, my husband says my family is loaded with family myths and that I should ask you to explain them. Well, I know the husband, but I don't know the woman's family. Family myth is a pattern of behavior that people act like it's true when in fact it isn't true. Why would people do that? Well, it perpetuates a particular role. It perpetuates a belief system. And really it perpetuates harmony. It keeps control of family. There are a lot of different people who have lived in families with myths and never thought of it. But maybe an example would be, how about somebody in the family who has a very important reputation as far as the family goes? And everybody in the family lives and acts and tries to take care of that reputation. When in fact a reputation may be relatively unknown except in the family itself. Or how about a man who is treated like his job is very, very important and everybody in the family has to cater to whatever his job calls for. It's very stressful or it's very demanding and everybody's supposed to be careful of how and what they say to father, when in fact the job may be just sort of ordinary. But he sort of rides along on a throne as if he's very important. Another family myth can and pretty commonly surround somebody, let's say, who has an ailment. That mother has headaches. Mother has headache, or Aunt Susie has certain aches or pains, and everybody in the family acts a certain way to take care of that particular problem. When in fact she may be healthier than anybody else in the family, probably going to outlive them. And sometimes we back off and look at that and say, well, that's not really true. Or we may have somebody in the family who's treated as if has an especially developed talent for something. And everybody in the family thinks that, except sometimes we find out later that the talent is pretty ordinary compared to other people. That's what family myths are about. Family myths are to protect and to preserve people's roles in families. Here's another one, also in reference to family life. It says, I know a family that seems to get along very well, but after being around them a while, I get the impression that nobody in the family really cares about anybody else. How common is that? Or what is it that's really going on? Yes, there are families where this happens. They have a Cold War, in a sense. No open battles, no open arguments, no open hostilities. Everybody is going around doing the right thing. Everyone is fulfilling particular functions. In a way, it reminds me of a business. I sometimes talk to people about their being in the business of parenting, the business of running a family. What happens is that this maintains the status quo. Nobody rocks the boat. Because really the people don't like each other particularly. They depend on each other to carry out these basic functions. And so there is this interdependency. But affection seems to be lacking. Real warmth in the family seems to be lacking. I've been around a few families like that, and sometimes I get the feeling, so far I've never said it to them, why don't you people fight a little bit? Let some of the steam out so that you can really become yourself. But that's called pseudo-mutuality. The people act as if there's a great deal of feeling when there really isn't. And here's one. It says, I saw a program recently documenting one of the popular network programs that confused me. It was on parenting, and I'm a mother of 4 teenagers, and I thought it was confusing because I got the impression I'm just supposed to ask questions and not set any limits. What do you think? About teenagers and adolescents. Let's talk about that first. You know, there's a world of difference, and every parent knows who's been down this road. There's a world of difference between a 13-year-old and a 19-year-old. Yet they're both teenagers. Do you treat them the same? It's kind of foolish if you do. Something's likely to rip apart. There's a great deal of difference between girls and boys. Adolescence. The word adolescence is used a lot in this situation. When you get family authorities, supposedly family therapists, and I claim to be one, who don't agree on how to handle certain problems, small wonder then that the rest of the folks have questions. So if you have questions, just go by what you think is best. You're probably going to be right. Start thinking about adolescence. When does it start? It's kind of hard to say, isn't it? When does it end? Rather difficult to really put a time on it, isn't it? Adolescence is generally defined as, in girls, is when they start the period, when menarche is established. In boys, with the first sign of masculinity. Adolescence, then how long does it last? Some books, and I have some, I've taught courses, graduate and undergraduate courses on adolescence and socialization. Some books say adolescence goes on to age 25. That sounds absurd to me. I would hope that people could be grown somewhere in there. There's another problem, though. Another problem that, society is strange. But I don't know of any way we can blame society or the changes in society for this. About the girls. The girls' menarche, that is the time that their period is first established. That's been getting 6 months younger per decade now, for several decades. Now, what's causing it? Not a good answer for that. But you think about it. Menarche used to be, typically in the 1930s and the 40s, 15 years of age. What is it today? 10, 11, 12. 12 is very common. So these girls are developing much sooner, much earlier than their mothers and grandmothers and their grandmothers' grandmothers in the 1930s. You make comparisons like that. These kids, they're really very young kids who have a body, take a 10-year-old body and put it, or rather a 10-year-old mind, and put it in a 16, 17-year-old body. That's what's happening. That's causing a lot of problems in society and a very real concern. Now, interestingly, boys aren't developing that way. Boys typically have been pretty much on the same pattern all along, and they have not changed. They are not maturing physically earlier than they used to, like the girls are. And that causes an imbalance. Imbalance there because the girls look and act physically more like people older than they really are, and so they're attracted and are attractive to the males who are older. And there used to be typically a 2-year age difference in development. Now it's more. So adolescents, how do you treat them? Well, the rule of thumb is be clear, be concise, be fair. Clear, consistent kindness. 3 rules of thumb. If you start that from day one with a child, you don't have to worry about the adolescent, what's going to happen in adolescence. The only thing we know for certain about adolescence is it's something that people go through. Characteristics of young teenagers, perfectly healthy teenagers, perfectly healthy young teenagers have these characteristics in common. They like to talk. They like to be together, socialize. They want what they want now. They have low frustration tolerance. They want to enjoy life. They're hedonistic just for the pleasure of it. They're indifferent to the world at large. Now, these are characteristics of normal, healthy adolescents, the young ones. You think about turning a world over to people like that. Well, we'd say they're too immature, yes, by definition, and the characteristics would suggest they're too immature. But sometimes a characteristic is also very evident that the very young adolescent cannot visualize, cannot conceptualize change in perspective. They have not the neurological development to do so. It's not their fault. Perfectly normal kids, not because they've been reared a certain way. Perfectly normal kids have a difficult time conceptualizing a system, a social system, and they do not see change in perspective. Well, if you don't see change in perspective, you're pretty well set to mess up in life, aren't you? If you're going out and trying to change a lot of things just for the pleasure of it. So a program that would suggest that you just ask questions. I recommend asking questions, certainly. Ask questions and be willing to take the answers. And be willing to hear the answers. You can usually get more done with questions than you can demands and commands. But also don't be afraid to set the limits. Children need parents. Children need to learn that there are limits, expectations. Children need to learn that there are duties and functions in families that need to be carried out. Excuse me, they have obligations to do the things that the parents have reared them to do. Hopefully the parents have values themselves and expect the children to live up to those values. So when you see programs or hear of them, where it's all one way or the other. It's like anything else. You know, when you take a test, you avoid the questions, and typically they're false if they say always and never, and they're absolute answers. People are constantly changing. Parents have been changing ever since Adam and Eve. Children are growing up, and they're different from parents. There always will be an age gap, a generation gap, because, you know, as far as I know, it's never been different. Children are born younger than parents. And that difference is most marked at birth, and it decreases, the differences keep decreasing as a child matures. And it's a delightful thing when two adults, one is a child and one is a parent, can really have a good relationship. It's something to look forward to. When the children have the cognitive ability to carry on a good conversation with an adult parent, that's quite a reward. Until another time, I'm Dr. John Middleton. This is Family Life in the North Country. Have a good one.
Back underway, and here's Sterling Deer. Deer, his pass to the side, over to Dam. Dam looks for a man. Behind the net, Dam still has it. They're taking some abuse in front of that net as the smaller guys are getting hammered. There's a shot. That one is blocked. Picking it up is Oakes again. They're going to have to hurry with that 30-second clock. There's a shot. Oh, as the buzzer went there, Bonspiel did get the shot away. It would have counted. Oh, they said, as the referee told us, that the 30-second shot did expire there. Referee Robert Francis. They come out the other way. Here come the Silverhawks again. Look at that. Allowed to waltz right in. There's John Bang. And we got some pushing and shoving going on. And we're going to see a penalty here. And let's see what it's going to be. A high stick, and Delarone looked like he's getting a little frustrated there.
I'm not too sure there. I'm going to check, Joe, if that is Delarone getting a penalty. I'm surprised. I didn't think he would lose it in this one. But I guess the heat's getting to the players. They're getting a bit frustrated in the game, and sometimes even the better players let the worst get a hold of them, and sometimes they can cost your team because he's the only one going to the sin bin.
Well, Liggins, no, Liggins is in there with him. But I got a feeling that he might be getting the extra penalty here. We didn't hear the call. There is a good chance that he's getting 4 minutes. Liggins is out there as well. Now here's Bonspiel. Bonspiel tries the backhand shot. A good save on an excellent backhand shot from Bonspiel. Boy, he's showing some excellent skill.
Definitely there, Joe. I think he was also showing that extra hustle there because he wasn't too popular about not getting a new shot clock, and he wanted to put on a spurt there to get a goal and get his team to climb back in it. But that's what you need. You need some good hustle from your players on your team.
All right, again, hustle is the name of the game. As we saw a little earlier, Junior Tremblay allowed his man to walk right in and get a shot. It resulted not in a goal that time, but look at this, walking right around. There's a shot, save, as Graham walks around his man, and they're going to come out the other way. But they are just allowing too much to happen. Bart Goodleaf wasn't able to stay with his man. Cook will pick it up behind his own net. We're about halfway through this second period here, halfway through the game. Pass up ahead. Once again, Graham. We've called his name an awful lot here. There's a quick shot. Graham also has Bartlett with him. Bartlett has 2 goals and an assist so far in this one. Graham loops it over to Cook. Cook taking his time, waiting for someone to get open. The pass was to Bartlett, but he was checked on the play. This time Tremblay stayed with his man. It's into the middle as the pass was too high for Thornton. Picked up finally by the Gunners, and they're going to come out the other way with it. 6-1 is our score in the second period. Curtis Stacy looking for someone to help him out here. Stacy has his man on him. Here's the pass to the side. Into the middle. Stacy couldn't pick it up. Oh, he was well set up, and they're going to go the other way, and Bartlett's going to hustle with a break. Here's Bartlett, one-on-one. There's a shot. He rings it off the goalpost. Good positioning once again for Gray. And all that was left was the goalpost to take the shot at.
Well, there, Joe, it looks like Ganyanga is going to get a big break. The ball went back in the crease, and now it is the Gunners' ball.
Well, we'll see what happens if they're able to take advantage of it, as John Dam is going to be by himself as the Gunners are on a slow change here. Coach Eddie Delarone didn't get the guys out there quite early enough. Into the middle is Oakes. He tries the bounce. Oakes is hammered on the play. Oh, some heavy-duty hitting here. And Sterling Deer goes against his man, J.J. Graham. Boy, did he hit John Oakes. And no penalty called on the play. And Graham's not that big a guy.
Well, Joe, I think he's going to have to pay for that because John Oakes, they ain't going to forget that. He's going to get him somewhere in the game, and I think it's going to come back to haunt him because he had that look in his eye like, uh-oh, what did I do?
I don't think he realizes that he went up against an older guy like that, too. And sometimes, you know, they'll remember. Now we got some pushing and shoving behind the net and going down heavily there. It looks like that's Kim Hall who was down in the dirt. When you play outdoors like this, the uniforms get a whole lot dirtier than playing on concrete. 6-1's the score in the second period. Gunners Lacrosse here on Hometown Cable. Deer, pass to the side. There's a pass to Horn. To the side, it's intercepted. The two Horn brothers on the same line at the same time, but look at this. Here comes Thornton. Thornton already has one goal, takes the shot, save. Picked up the other way. There's the rebound. Oh, all to the side. They take a shot that misses. Nelson Jones had the rebound, and the Silverhawks still continue. What a difference from last year with this team. They got some guys who can handle that ball, and they're not afraid to hit. Into the boards. Ouch. Hall has taken a couple of hits here, and he looks like he's hurt himself as he was hit into the boards. We're going to probably have a penalty here as Horn hit him into the boards from behind. And yes, he is hurt. Kim Hall, one of the field lacrosse players. I spoke to him between periods, and he's happy to be here, but it looks like his knee has taken a bit of a hit here, and let's hope that it's not too serious. But he's holding on, and it looks like Horn is going to get at least a couple of minutes. It's going to be a pushing from behind penalty as referee Robert Francis gives him the signal. And they have the trainer out there. A very small crew here from Oneida. They brought their coach, Gil Stout, who, by the way, is the brother of none other than Murray Ace Stout of Onondaga, who's in action tonight. They take on Gahnawage over at the sports complex over there. And the battle of the two remaining undefeated teams. That one should be a good one. And Gil knows his lacrosse. He's been out with this team for their first couple of years. Very happy to see an improvement. And it looks like Hall is able to walk off under his own steam, but it probably will miss a couple of shifts here. And as you can see, he has a brace with him, so he's had some problems in the past, despite his youth. You know, once you get those knee problems, you hate to see them because they keep coming back.
Yeah, definitely, there, Joe. And that's probably one of the most severe injuries an athlete can have. You know, is the knee and getting hit or falling in the boards, and he's in quite a bit of pain. You see him trying to walk it off. He's probably off camera, but you can see him walking around. He's trying to loosen it up. He's probably gonna have to put some ice on it, and it looks like he got a pretty bit of a scrape there, Joe. So I don't know if he's even gonna come back in this game. He doesn't look too comfortable at all. And as we mentioned earlier, we said it was Horn that got the penalty, but in fact I think it's Steve Bonspiel, and Steve Bonspiel is a very classy player. I don't think he did that intentionally. I think this in the heat of the action. He just wanted to bump the man and get the loose ball.
Yeah, he's a gentleman out there. Not afraid to do his share of hitting, but he's a pretty clean player, and we've seen him in action over the years. On the power play, Silverhawks once again. Here's Bartlett. Bartlett winds, shoots, save looked like off the mask almost of Gray. Gray has been outstanding here today. He played the first period. There's a pass into the middle. Bartlett again takes the shot. That one just misses, and it's going to go off onto highway. What highway is this that we're on? Is that the 217?
I'm not sure there, Joe, but it's on the highway, and some lucky fan's going to find it on the side of the road.
Well, they come out the other way again. Here comes Graham. Graham to the side of the net. Has his man wide open. Fakes shot. Save, but he steps in the crease. And it is going to be Gunner's ball as Nelson Jones was one of their best players last year and certainly is a big part of this team this year. Losing the ball. They go the other way. Graham now gets the pass over to his man Jones, who fires it wide, and unable to pick up the ball there was Smokey Richards. Smokey hasn't seen too much action here in this game, and in the last game we did against Tyandanaga, he was all over the floor.
He definitely was there, Joe, and he wasn't in the game against the Outlaws. There's a number of players who weren't there. They are here tonight, but they're not on the scoreboard yet, but we'll expect to see more from them later on.
Well, Norman Beaver is another player that we haven't seen that much of. We have not seen him out there at all. And Eddie Delarone is not using his entire bench at this point, and that may be having some effect. There's a hard pass across to Deere. And Ryan Deere couldn't hold on. And are we getting a penalty here on the play? It looks like Junior Tremblay is going to get the gate.
He definitely is there, Joe. Referee Francis gave him a penalty for hitting, I believe it's Doug Lay from behind, and he said to Junior, you know, you got to wait for the whistle, and he set him off even before the whistle the game was whistled back in. So Traum